Okay, let's call to order the meeting of the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District Hearing Board on May the 5th, 2014 at 5:30 p.m. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Bonsbach.
Here.
Board Member Herlock. Board Member Stubblefield.
Here.
Board Member Murphy.
Here. The next item of business on the agenda is the swearing in of our new member, Dr. Stephen Bonsbach. And will you take over from there?
Yes, Mr. Bonsbach, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Stephen Bonsbach,
I, Stephen Bonsbach,
do solemnly affirm that I will support and defend
do solemnly affirm that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
and all enemies, foreign and domestic,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
and I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely, that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or
purpose
purpose
of evasion,
I can't understand
of evasion,
that, of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
discharge duties
That I'm about to enter.
that I am about to enter.
Great. Thank you very much. Welcome aboard.
Would the clerk now please administer the affirmation to those who are going to give testimony tonight?
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you are about to give in the matter now pending before the board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Tonight, the board is hearing petition number 851 in the matter of the application of Ventura Regional Sanitation District for an interim variance of District Rule 29C, condition of permits, violation of permit to operate number 07340-160, condition 9, and the revised authorities to construct number 07340-130, conditions D2 and G2. Will the petitioner representatives please state your names, positions, job titles for the record and present your petitions?
Thank you. I'm Frank Kiesler. I'm the Director of Operations for the Ventura Regional Sanitation District.
I'm Dick Baldwin. I'm an air quality consultant for Ventura Regional Sanitation District.
And I'm Mark Zerbel, General Counsel to the Sanitation District.
Again, my name is Frank Kiesler. I'm the Director of Operations for Ventura Regional Sanitation District. I'm here to provide a presentation to you regarding our petition for interim variance for from compliance with our permitted total sulfur limit of 20 parts per million in the landfill gas combusted in our biosolids facility and microturbine electrical generation facility. The presentation provides a brief overview of the toll and road facility, the applicable permits, and reason for the variance request. Some background: the toll and road landfills and essential public services defined in the California Health and Safety Code. The Health and Safety Code and APCD's Rule 123 require that in making a decision on our variance, the hearing board must consider whether or not requiring immediate compliance would impose an unreasonable burden upon the landfill. which is an essential public service. The landfill is owned and operated by Ventura Regional Sanitation District. It's an enterprise agency governed by a 9-member board of directors representing the cities and special districts served. Oops, sorry about that. Real quick overview of the facility. The Toll and Road facility is comprised of 3 primary facilities or operations of the facility. The solid waste landfill is the largest activity. The facility receives roughly 9,000 tons per week of refuse for disposal, which represents about 50% of the waste generated in Ventura County. The biosolids management facility is a facility that was commenced operation in 2009. It's powered by landfill gas recovered from the landfill. It processes roughly 60% of the biosolids generated at wastewater treatment plants in the county. And because of its local location relative to former points of management for those materials, it's taken, since its inception or commencement of operation, it's taken roughly 1 million miles of truck traffic off the roads annually, along with roughly 1,800 tons of greenhouse gas emissions have been eliminated as a result of reducing dependence on out-of-county facilities. The microturbines facility is an electrical generation facility. It's got a capacity of 2.25 megawatts of power. It's fueled exclusively by landfill gas, and reducing the load on conventional facilities. Most of the Toll and Road facilities are off the power grid as a result of our on-site generation, and any excess power generated at the facility is sold to Edison, and thus providing additional power for the facilities and reducing the load on conventional facilities. This is a photo of the landfill itself. This is a few years ago. It actually predates the development of the biosolids and microturbines facilities. But in the lower left-hand corner, there's in that vicinity is where the biosolids and microturbines are presently located. That is a picture of the biosolids facility itself, and that is a photograph of 3 of the 9 microturbines on site. Real briefly, the facility is, the solid waste portion of the facility generates roughly $10 million in annual revenue, is financed by public debt, which currently stands at around $8.8 million in outstanding debt, and provides full-time employment to 20 people. The biosolids and microturbines is $3.5 million in revenue, is again financed by public debt with roughly $11.6 million outstanding, and provides employment for six people. The facilities at Toll are all non-tax supported. They're public agency, but only supported by fees for services provided. The infrastructure, again, is funded by public monies with outstanding loans, as noted previously. The facility operates under long-term contract with both public and private entities. And the manager of the waste streams managed at the facility have significant public health and environmental benefits through their proper management. Prior to the development of the biosolids and microturbine project, the facility combusted all landfill gas collected at the facility through a flare, which continues to operate today. And the permit at the time that the flare was installed, it was not the sulfur limit. The total sulfur limit for the flare was not specifically stated in the permit, but effectively, when you look at the calculations that came up with the mass loadings for that flare, it was roughly 60 parts per million. In 2009, we were issued a permit for the development of the microturbines and biosolids project, and from the period of 2009 into June to 2012, the permitted destruction devices on site were the existing flare and the addition of the biosolids oil heater burners and the microturbines. And at that time, the permit was written to include a specific limit of 60 parts per million as hydrogen sulfide as the total sulfur limit. Also at that time, Rule 54 air quality impact analysis was performed at the 60 parts per million in the limit, and the facility was found to be compliant with that rule. To ensure compliance with the 60 parts per million limit, the facility purchased and installed a sulfur control system to reduce the sulfur content of the fuel. In June of 2012 to the current, in earlier 2012, the district requested a new permit or modification of the permit to allow the addition of a thermal oxidizer to the biosolids facility to treat the ROC, destruct the ROC coming off the biosolids process prior to discharge to the atmosphere. At that point, we had the flare, the biosolids heaters, the microturbines, and then the thermal oxidizer as the emission and our landfill gas destruction devices. And at that time, the district requested a permitted total sulfur as hydrogen sulfide for landfill gas to be reduced from 60 parts per million, which had been, to 20 parts per million. And at that time, with the addition of the thermal oxidizer as an additional emission source, the Rule 54 air quality impact analysis was again performed at the 20 parts per million limit. And again, the facility was found to be compliant with the rule. So this brings us to our current issue and why we're here in front of you. At the point in which the application to add the thermal oxidizer was prepared, the VRSD staff erroneously interpreted the meaning of total sulfur as hydrogen sulfide, limit of 60 ppm for landfill gas. The misinterpretation of the H2S concentration as being representative of total sulfur as H2S led to the request for the reduced limit of 20 ppm. Staff misunderstood the meaning of H2S concentration and thought it was representative of the total concentration of sulfur. The existing sulfur control system cannot consistently satisfy the 20 ppm sulfur limit, although the system is extremely effective at reduction of H2S. From time to time, the parameters that make up the total sulfur content of the gas fluctuate, and from time to time, the non-H2S components, when added to what little is left of the H2S, actually causes us to be in excess of 20 parts per million. On March 25th, VRSD became aware of this error in interpretation of total versus hydrogen sulfide concentration. I'm sorry, thank you. Nope. And on March 26th, we reviewed the permits and testing requirements for the sulfur and their relationship to H2S, retrained the staff, and implemented modified management and review of the monitoring data. On April 4th, we engaged our On April 4th, we engaged the consultant to rerun the Rule 54 air quality impact analysis at the original 60 ppm total sulfur as hydrogen sulfide concentration, and included the additional emissions of the thermal oxidizer. And again, the facility was found to be compliant with the rule. On April 8th, VRSD met with the APCD staff to inform them of this issue. And on that same day, we submitted an application to APCD requesting modification of the permit limit for total sulfur to be returned to its original 60 ppm concentration. And then on April 9th, the VRSD submitted the interim and regular variance petitions to the APCD. In conclusion, the variance is requested to permit continued operation of the landfill, the biosolids, and microturbines while the permit application is being processed by APCD. The Toll and Road facility provides the critical waste management and energy generation services to Ventura County. Disruption of the facility operation would have a significant air quality impact and service disruptions to the citizens of Ventura County. And disruption of a facility operation places at risk enterprises generating $13.5 million in revenue and full employment for 26 people. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Does the board have any questions of the petitioner? Do members of the board have questions for the petitioner? Mike, do you have any questions? Okay, Doctor. I have a few questions, if I could. One of them start on a real basic level, because you're going to be here for a regular variance also, and just to get the background on that. In your application, I note that you interchangeably use the terminology parts per million and parts per million by volume, and also the abbreviations ppm and ppmv. Is there a distinction between the two?
Technically, no. I think it's just people don't want to hit the V key when they're typing ppm is what it gets down to. It's always parts per million by volume.
Okay. I just need, if I could, to understand a little bit, just because I'm probably just a little bit dense, about the staff's error in understanding exactly what that is. According to, again, the wording is that they had been comparing the H2S concentration of treated landfill gas to the 22 ppmv standard rather than comparing the total sulfur concentration measured as H2S to the 20 ppmv standard. Now, just as a layman, that doesn't make much sense to me. Can you explain that? That you've got H2S, which is a particular compound, and so how do you get it? How do you get it measured by different standards?
I'll take a stab at it, and Dick may need to help. But there's two tests that we perform when monitoring the gas quality, and on a daily basis we monitor with a particular method that measures only H2S. So all we're doing is measuring that one parameter in the gas. The gas itself, the total sulfur, when measured as H2S, there's some 15 or 20 other compounds that are in the gas that when the lab analyzes it, it can represent that as H2S. So although you have 15 different parameters, they boil it down in a molecular weight to show how much of that, when you convert it to H2S, that's how much you have. So the permit regulates this on total sulfur, and that's what the lab data provides. Because of the time it requires to take a lab sample and send it and get results, we do a daily sample for just to H2S. H2S typically represents 90-some-odd% of what we're looking at in the gas. So it's a good indicator of gas quality. So we get a result that measures H2S as H2S, and that's on a daily basis. And then once a month, we see a data point that shows total sulfur as H2S. And as best I can tell, this predates me, but the confusion I believe existed in that the staff it wasn't apparent to them that these were two different things, that they both said as H2S, so they understood that the daily reading was in fact essentially comparable to a total sulfur number.
Okay. So let's see if I can reiterate that and if I'm understanding it correctly. So they were looking just at the H2S, which was below 20 parts per million, but if they looked at all the hydrogen compounds, sometimes it would be above 20 parts per million, even though they represented that's commonly represented as H2S, but it's really not. And that was what you had your permit based on, that had all those elements together had to be below 20.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
To put some of that in context, a test report that was performed, the sample was collected on April 15th. The H2S, this was a bag sample, so it analyzed everything. The H2S was 0.125 parts per million, ppmv. But the total reduced sulfur as H2S was 19.6. So on that day, it's in compliance with the 20 ppm, but that's fairly typical that the H2S component of the total gas is extremely small as a percentage. And yeah, this is after the treatment of the sulfur-treat to take out the sulfur compounds, or primarily take out hydrogen sulfide.
You now have a application for a regular variance, but you also are trying to change the permit to operate. Which one will probably be finished first?
They're still working on the application for the permit change, and that's to reinstate 60 ppm. I don't I don't work directly on that, but there's a good chance that that application could be completed before we have to have a hearing for the regular variance.
Okay. And if it was completed before, we wouldn't need to be back here.
No, sir, we wouldn't.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have. Anybody else have questions?
I'd just like to hear from the petitioner with respect to any of the effect, if any, that this would have on odors from the landfill. Because we have a history here of local residents, I'm sure you guys are aware of it, since you were all here before, having complained about odors. Is going to 60 parts per million instead of 20 going to impact that?
Yeah, the facility operated at 60 previously, and previously for many years prior to the establishment of the biosolids. So given the destruction, one of the points of the flare or the destruction devices is to destroy all VOCs and render all the other compounds non-odorous. That's my understanding, and I've never experienced the smell coming off of a landfill flare when operating properly, or any other permitted destruction device. I should say that I think in the last couple, I don't know that I think every source test we've done on all the destruction devices here in the last couple of years have all passed without any issue, and so I don't believe that there's any impact, or there would be no impact to odor adversely as a result of increasing to 60 ppm. I'd invite Dick to speak on that if he'd like to.
First, the 60 ppm is, or less, is for gases which are going through 4 different destructive devices: the flare, the microturbines, the heaters for the dryers, and the thermal oxidizer, and they're all being combusted. Those were modeled when the application for the thermal oxidizer was applied for. They were modeled at 60 parts per million. There was no problem then at 60 parts per million, but it was modeled beforehand. Then it was modeled at 20 ppm, I'm sorry, for getting the thermal oxidizer. To get this permit, it was modeled again at 60 parts per million and showed that the SO2 and the H2S concentrations at the fence line were significantly below the limits that are established in Rule 54. So because it's a combusted gas, not one of the fugitive emissions from materials laying around in the plant, I seriously doubt that it could contribute to the odor, but the modeling also suggests that there should not be any contribution to odors, and it's clearly within compliance of the requirements of Rule 54.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, what motivated you to go for 20 rather than the 60 that you're allowed to have? And also, what do you anticipate the future output will be as far as H2S?
I'm the reason we're all here, probably. When VRSD was putting an application together to put in the thermal oxidizer, I asked the question of the staff, are there things you're doing now, emissions, on the permit that could be reduced? Because we're going to do a modeling study of this place, and if you're not putting out emissions that are under the current permit, well, let's reduce them if we don't need them. So one of the things that was looked at is there was an understanding that the total sulfur compounds as H2S were always well below 20 parts per million. So I suggested, why don't we model it at 20 parts per million then? And it came in very good, and with the thermal oxidizer added, keeping in mind the thermal oxidizer was not there in the first go round of modeling when the plant was built without the thermal oxidizer, and that was done at 60 parts per million. So it operated at 60 parts per million for quite a while. So I was under the belief that they would always be under 20 parts per million total sulfur compounds as H2S, but because of this misunderstanding, it's always, the H2S is always well under 20 parts per million, but sometimes the total sulfur compounds aren't. So the decision was made to move forward and request it to go down to 20 because we didn't need 60, it was thought. It turns out that's not right, that there was a misunderstanding by the people doing the analysis, and it can be higher than 20 at times.
What do you anticipate it will be? Do you think it'll always stay around 20, or do you expect it to jump up into 60?
No, I don't expect it to jump up to 60, but Frank can probably answer that better than I can.
I don't either. I don't expect it to go that high. That I believe with the proper operation of the control facility, we won't ever see H2S, non-H2S compounds go that high. I don't anticipate that. None of the data, historical data, indicates that they'll approach that high of a level. So certainly, it's incumbent upon us to track that data every month and see how the system's performing and what the gas is doing. And certainly, if we need to make changes, that we need to be there before we have to come to you. We need to, and that's part of our business. We need to know what the gas is doing so we can stay ahead of it. So that's something we have to do every month: look at the data and analyze and determine if we need to change our course of action or how we need to treat it. But as of now, I don't see any indication that we're going to have that problem.
I have a few more. Where do you take your measurements of the hydrogen compounds? And by that I mean, my understanding is that you've got the pipes coming from the landfill, then it goes to the sulfur treat vessels, then it goes to either the microturbines or the thermal heaters. Where in that line is the testing done for that you're reporting?
Right out at the discharge of the sulfur treat vessels.
So after it goes
after treatment,
after it goes through the sulfur treat vessels.
And we actually take two samples. We take a sample before the sulfur treat and after, so we can see the performance of the media.
But the one that you need to be in compliance with is the one immediately afterwards.
Correct.
Okay. And then, of course, you've got sulfur there, and sulfur just doesn't disappear when you flare it or run it through thermal oxidizer. Does it just become then the compound sulfur, or what happens?
It goes to sulfur dioxide, and there's a permit limit for sulfur dioxide,
Okay.
pounds per hour and a tons per year, and it's tested twice a year, and they're at least from the thermal oxidizer, and it's always in compliance.
Is there any difference in effect on the environment as having sulfur dioxide as opposed to H2S?
Well, there's different health effects from the two, and under Rule 54, you have to model for both sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide. For the there's 4 different limits, 2 for each compound.
The H2S obviously smells worse, correct?
Well,
Or not?
at those low levels, you probably wouldn't detect it, but H2S can have a very serious health effect at low levels.
Okay. I have no further questions. Does the district have any further questions? Any further questions from the board? Are there any questions from people in the audience? Then I close the hearing. And what is the pleasure of the board?
I have no problem with the petitioner's request.
Do you move to grant the draft order of the interim variance? Okay. Second.
Chair Murphy, before you do that, I have a couple notations you should make for it. I think it needs a couple changes because the presentation was by different people than listed in the order.
Okay.
You have an additional member for the applicant and 1 absent member from staff. And I also would suggest you add to the conclusions and order a sentence after "until compliance is demonstrated, whichever is sooner," that in no event will the interim variance extend beyond August 4th, 2014 because of the 90-day limitation.
I was also wondering if, for the district, in the very heading, that you, there is the violation of 160 condition 9, and then authority to construct 130 D2 and G2. Actually, it's revised authority to construct number 07340-130, right? There was a revision of that, and it's a revision that we're in violation of. Is
Yes,
that
it
not
would be
correct?
those two conditions as revised by authority to construct 07340-160.
Okay, all right, thank you. And with those corrections, is the board in agreement? The motion and the second still stand? Okay. Call the roll. Vote.
Board Member Bonsbach. Board Member Stubblefield.
Aye.
Board Member Murphy.
Aye.